President Rodrigo Duterte's pivot to China has made diplomatic waves. On his visit to Beijing, he secured $24 billion in funding and investment pledges and announced an historic shift in Philippine-US relations.
I announce my separation from the United States.
Once he was back on home soil, though, he clarified that it wasn't a complete break.
Separation of my foreign policy, that it need not dovetail the foreign policy of America. That's what I meant, actually. Even severe is to cut. Separate is just to chart another way of doing it.
Since entering office, Duterte has barely spoken to US President Barack Obama, but he has insulted him. That behavior, coupled with anti-American rhetoric, has baffled officials.
The succession of controversial statements and comments and a real climate of uncertainty about the Philippines' intentions has created consternation in a number of countries, not only in mine.
Duterte's desire to separate from American influence signifies a fundamental shift between the allies. The US and the Philippines are bound militarily. The Mutual Defense Treaty from 1951 means the countries have to come to each other's aid. This was boosted by the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement signed in 2014. It was seen as a way to bolster the country's rights to territory in the disputed South China Sea. The issue of ownership in that area has shaped the Asia-Pacific region in recent years and has formed a key part of Barack Obama's pivot to Asia. China has welcomed Duterte's decision to foster friendship and put territorial claims to the side.
那么对于中方来讲，我们认为在当今的国际关系当中，我们不应该抱着冷战思维。
That places the US in a delicate diplomatic position. Some Duterte supporters are backing him. But many Filipinos have a favorable view of the US. A survey, 76% trust the US, but only 22% have much trust in China. Duterte has consistently said his only master is the Filipino people and not the outside world. If this rhetoric proves unpopular, could it be enough to make him backtrack from this policy? Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Well, Richard W. Murphy joins me now from New York. He is a former U.S. ambassador to the Philippines. Ambassador Murphy, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, from your perspective, has there ever been a time when U.S.-Philippine relations have felt this strained?
Well, we've had strain, certainly in the past. Just before I arrived in Manila myself to take up the job as ambassador, it was in 1978. There were demonstrations in front of the American Embassy in Manila about the military relationship then, and that has been off and on a sore point on the part of certain political leaders in Manila and the Philippine public and the American government.
Okay, but that was almost, wow, that was almost 40 years ago. Go ahead, you think it's important?
Well, that's true. I think that's what's going on right now is kind of a puzzle, because the United States has been very supportive of the Philippines in its confrontation, diplomatic confrontation with China over the South China Sea, and that support has been welcomed. And all of a sudden, the President Duterte is talking of a separation and ending of the confrontation with China on his part, on the part of the Philippines, on that issue. Okay, well, that's his approach. He thinks he's going to do better directly negotiating with the government of China. He's had a good visit in Beijing, and let's see what develops.
it is important, as you say, but the numbers we saw in that report showing that the vast majority of the Philippine public supports a strong relationship, almost 75%, while only a quarter of them actually support stronger relations with China. So do you think that might change if Duterte stays in power? Do you have a feeling the Philippine public might lean toward China with him or may end up rebelling against him in a sense?
Well, again, I think it's a bit early to make solemn pronouncements about the public moving one way or the other. But you're right, there is a long-standing, solid relationship between the public in the Philippines and in the United States. We have a Philippine-American community, Filipino community in this country of some, I think it's between 3 and 4 million people who have had good lives here, who have been a source of support to their families back in the Philippines, and there's been an increasingly good investment climate for American business these last few years. The relationship is looked on favorably, whether it's 76%, 70%, that's extremely high.
Well, then tell me how you think the U.S. should respond right now. How careful, perhaps, do you suggest it should be in its response and not upping the rhetoric themselves?
Well, there's no point in upping the rhetoric. The Philippine president on his home turf is known as a man who speaks roughly, speaks directly, and I don't think it's our part to respond in that manner. What's important to remember is there's been no formal government-to-government request to change the Mutual Defense Treaty or the support of the executive level agreement on defense cooperation. Now, let's see the reaction he'll get from the Philippine Senate, from the House, from the public. The Philippine press is very active and quick to comment on its own leaders' handling of issues. I'm optimistic this is going to work out.
Okay, so I mean, having said that, then, do you think this just could be a case of Duterte, in a sense, kind of catering to his base supporters, while his diplomats and representatives will do otherwise? They will tone down the rhetoric, so to speak.
Well, I think they will tone it down, but look, I am not forgetting there is a long history of some resentment in dealing with the Philippines. We've been accused of being condescending and arrogant, et cetera, et cetera. So against that background, this outburst is not frankly surprising to me.
Okay, Richard W. Murphy, thank you so much for joining us there from New York.